In December 2019, we began a monumental task, one that had not been undertaken for over 70 years, standing up a new military service. Our Guardians have done a lot already in nearly 4 years, and 2023 was a banner year for many of these efforts. But we're not done yet. We have more units being activated, more missions coming online, more personnel interested in being part of the Space Force than ever before. We have the most talented workforce, the most technologically advanced and innovative service on the face of the earth. And we are going to continue to forge a purpose-built Space Force, laser-focused on securing our nation's interests in, from, and to space. So get ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. My name is Matt Anderson, the Chief Growth Officer at the Space Force Association. And today we continue our Space Warfighter talks with the Commander of Space Base Delta One, Colonel David Hanson. Sir, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for the opportunity.
What a great 2 years almost you've had since you took command here at Peterson Space Force Base in beautiful Colorado Springs, Colorado. Before we dive into the mission and the great power competition, what our nation's facing right now, we have a lot of viewers who look at leaders like yourself and say, I want to be them one day. But they're often in high school. They might be in Space Force JROTC or in ROTC, which you were. Can you tell us what you were thinking about when you were in high school looking to go into perhaps military service, and what was on your mind, and then we'll just kind of how you became a Delta Commander.
You bet. Well, thanks again, and thanks for the opportunity to be able to talk about Space Base Delta One. So I come from a family that didn't have any military experience, and not because we were against it, just nobody served in the military. My grandfather served in World War II in the Royal Canadian Air Force. I had a long-lost uncle that served in Vietnam for a few years. But other than that, that was it. We had no relatives that were currently serving. So my service came as a lot of us as we entered ROTC. It was a scholarship that got me.
Yeah.
So once I was awarded that Air Force ROTC scholarship and went to school at Iowa State University, I said, yep, I'll try it. And after a year or so, I said, I really like this. I really like this kind of lifestyle. I think I want to try this out. And that was nearly 35 years ago when I started college. So entered the military, and as less and less space operators these days, I'm the dual track guy. I'm the guy that started in missiles and started off doing missile alert duty in Minot, North Dakota. Then did a stint teaching ROTC at the University of Notre Dame, something that I wanted to personally do, although all of my leadership along the way says, don't do that, you're going to kill your career, you'll never make major. And no, I made major and enjoyed my time at ROTC. And then kind of crossed over. Back then it was space and missile was combined, and so I was going to go do my space time, and I started off at Schriever Space Force Base in the 3rd Space Operations Squadron, flying then the NATO Skynet constellation right next to the Discus, and really fell in love with what we were doing and trying to do in space. And along the way, I had several staff assignments, both at Headquartered Air Force Space Command as well as NORAD USNORTHCOM, and then really kind of got my specialty in space, if you want to call it, and it's really been the satellite control network and specifically ground stations. I've commanded at Guam Tracking Station as a major, and then at the 23rd Space Operations Squadron out at New Boston Space Force Station and Boss Tracking Station, and then we were in charge of Lion. We were also in charge of Pogo up into Greenland. And then really it's all about opportunities and really what you do with those opportunities. So again, I was at Guam and had some real property that I was in charge of, and then moving on to Squadron Command at New Boston, and I was the squadron commander, but I was also the installation commander. So I was ensuring that the satellite control mission was flown smoothly, but also taking care of that nearly 3,000 acre installation out in New Hampshire. So my first taste of installation command. Fast forward a few years, I got the opportunity to go command up at the former Thule Air Base, now we call Bidufik Space Base up in northern Greenland. So my second opportunity to command not only an organization, but to command at an installation, and where that second hat is installation commander. Certainly doesn't make me an expert, but at least I know the lingo and I kind of know the processes of working through the Air Force and running bases. So when the opportunity came up about 2 years ago, it was 2 years ago in this past May, when General Whiting asked me if I wanted to take command of then the Peterson Schriever Garrison, but soon to be Space Base Delta One. After picking my jaw up off the floor, I said, "Sir, that would be a great opportunity for myself and for my family." And so we took command in July of 22, and it's been a whirlwind, but it's been wonderful every single day. I really enjoyed the missions. Absolutely love the people that I work with.
Yeah, I'll bet when you were a major, or when you were at Guam in Greenland, and you think about the former Air Force Satellite Control Network, now Satellite Control Network, and you watched a typhoon go through Guam
Sure did.
almost a year ago. The importance of the SCN today, as we look at China and Russia and just the mission of the Space Force right now, how that has changed. It must be fun to watch from your current
Yeah, that
role.
SCN, that's the highway to space. That's how we talk to our satellites. And without that, the satellites aren't going to do things for a very long time.
Yeah, and no doubt being that installation commander previously prepared you for your current role here at Space Base Delta One. So for those that have been following the Peterson Schriever Garrison, Peterson Air Force Base, formerly to that, they see the airplanes taking off every day out of here. You can call it lucky or you can say unlucky, but you have some pretty high-ranking tenants that you have here on base that are, I'm sure, don't ever. Many people like yourself on Air Force bases and that have combatant commands, they're like, yes, I'm very blessed to have many of these guests on. But we shared time together at NORAD USNORTHCOM when I was still serving, and what an important mission. And you're right, Space Base Delta One. When you think about a national crown jewel of the missions that are located here, your job and your team, it's so important. Can you tell us, just big picture, for those who may not be familiar with this term, Space Base Delta One, what all it includes, the people, multiple military services that are working on this base? Just give us go big to small on Space Base Delta One.
You bet. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, Space Base Delta One is an organization. It's not a location. It is an organization. And not to be confused with Space Delta One. And there's a Space Delta One out of Vandenberg. We are Space Base Delta One. Words matter. So we are the organization that's charged with running 7 of the current 14 Space Force installations. So by title, I'm the base commander at Peterson Space Force Base, Schriever Space Force Base, and Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Station. We also have oversight and basically run the bases up at, as I mentioned, Pidufik Space Base, Greenland, New Boston Space Force Station in New Hampshire, the Maui Space Surveillance Complex, and then Kina Point Space Force Station in Oahu. So overall, we have 7 installations that we are running for the Space Force. When I say running for the Space Force, when the Space Force first stood up, it was taking a look of how does it want to do its operational missions versus how do we want to run the bases. And we wanted to break away from that Air Force construct where you had one wing commander, one base commander who ran the base and everything that was on it, the operational mission, as well as all of the mission support and the medical. Well, the Space Force said, that focus was off. They wanted the operational space commanders to be solely focused on their space niche, on their operations. And so whether it be space domain awareness or electronic warfare or orbital warfare, those Delta commanders, they come to work and they do space operations, period, dot. Then we have the Space Base Deltas, and yes, Space Base Delta 2 up at Buckley and Space Base Delta 3 at Los Angeles. We're charged with running the bases and really doing everything else in support of the Space Deltas and all the other mission partners that we have on our installations. So whether it be all mission support from civil engineering to contracting to force support, security forces, comptroller, all of the Delta staff agencies to include public affairs and protocol and chaplain support, plus all the medical falls under us as well. And all the interaction that we have with the community. And so we do it all so the Space Deltas don't have to. They can focus on their space missions. Now, it's all based on relationships, and we have to ensure that we are meeting what the standards of what the Space Deltas and the other mission partners need. So we have constant contact with them. And hey, we need some public affairs support. We need protocol support. Hey, guess what? Power outage, and now our generators are running, or our HVAC is offline. Those are things that we will go after and try to fix to ensure that they have the bandwidth and the focus to do their space missions and do it awesome.
That's good insight. Talk about the people a little bit. The Space Force, the Air Force relationship under your command is fantastic. And many of our predecessors that we've interviewed have talked about that, but I think your role is unique and really awesome to talk about. Can you talk about the airmen that work for you as well as the Guardians?
Sure can. Well, the Air Force and the Space Force, especially being in one department, we are inexplicably linked. And although I'm a Guardian right now, I was a proud airman for 26 years. And so under the Space Base Delta construct, and especially at Space Base Delta 1, 97% of the folks that work in our Delta are airmen. And we like it that way. because who does civil engineering, security forces, contracting, force support, comptroller, chaplaincy, all of the base support, medical? Who does that really well? Well, the Air Force does it really well. And the Space Force does not want to specialize in those career fields. They want to focus on the big five in the Space Force, operations and intelligence and acquisitions and those very specific space niches, and leaving everything else to the Air Force. And so we're a big organization because we're running 7 bases. We have 3,600 personnel, and like I said, 97% of them are airmen, and that percentage is only going up. I'll soon be one of the only few Guardians in Space Base Delta 1. Now, the Space Force wants the Space Base Deltas to be run by a Guardian because we understand the space missions and we can interpret those to the airmen, saying this is what's behind those big buildings that have no windows. This is the after hours things that are going on. This is why the HVAC is really important to keep running. This is important why we have to come in on the weekends or at night if there's an outage, because it's directly affecting space missions. So very proud of the airmen that work for us, and they do a great job, and they understand the missions, and they understand the importance of what they're doing is not just a local space mission. It is on a global scale, and really it's adding to national security.
It is, and on the bases that you've mentioned, it's not just Peterson Space Force Base, but on Peterson Space Force Base, where you've had some pretty high-ranking guests that have landed here with the President of the United States, there's not a lack of DVs on this base as well. Can you talk about some of the mission partners on Peterson? And no doubt, Space Base Delta 1, the people of Space Base Delta 1 are supporting these very important national level missions. Can you talk about some of the tenant units and the mission partners you have?
Sure can. And you talked about the President was here for the Air Force Academy graduation last June, and so we supported Air Force One and the President and his whole entourage. He actually spent the night in Colorado Springs, and so that was a fun 24 hours that he was on the installation. Had the opportunity to meet him with some other senior leaders, and that was a wonderful opportunity. We do have actually the second busiest distinguished visitor flight line in the Department of the Air Force. Of course, Andrews in D.C. being the number one, but guess what? Peterson has the second largest DV hub. As for the other mission partners, yes, we are one of only 2 military bases that have headquarters for 2 combatant commands on our installation. Peterson is also home to NORAD US Northern Command, as we mentioned earlier, and then the home of United States Space Command is here. And so, yes, 2 4-star leaders there and their staffs. You could say there's a lot of general officers that live and work on Peterson specifically, and so that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to have those folks right in your backyard if you need something and to offer them support. So we have great relationships with them, and they understand the role that we're supposed to play, and they understand the scope of our responsibility. This base as well as the other bases. So we just have a great working relationship with them, and we just need to keep that up.
That's good. Those relationships are key inside the gate and outside the gate. Can you talk about some of the civic leaders and the partnerships you've made with the community in your command time?
Absolutely. That's really important to us, because we can't do what we do running the bases or the Deltas running their space operations or the Homeland Defense mission of NORAD USNORTHCOM without the support of the community. And so we consider it very important to go out and either establish or strengthen those relationships. A couple that I'll call out is with the Colorado Springs Airport. We are neighbors. We share the flight line. It's their flight line, but it comes right against the base, and I already mentioned the DV hub that we have here, and so we have a great relationship with them, whether it be improvements to the runway or to the taxiways. The FAA control tower is actually on Peterson Space Force Base for the whole airport, and we just can't thank them enough. In addition, we have great relationship with both Colorado Springs Police Department as well as El Paso County Sheriff's Department and a lot of the local law enforcement, whether it be FBI or the local OSI or the local bases and their military, police, and security forces at those bases. In fact, we help host a monthly breakfast with all law enforcement. Every quarter it's on Peterson, but we attend most all the other ones on the other installations. And it's first of all, I feel very safe when I go to those meetings because everybody except me is armed in that meeting, in that breakfast. But that's just a great police collaboration that we have with them. And then moving on to the fire departments, we have a relationship with the Colorado Springs Fire Department as well as some of the local other fire departments. In fact, out at Schriever Space Force Base, we have probably one of the better if not the best, fire training facilities in the area. And we open that up to the other departments, and they come out and they do training there, whether it be rappelling training or actual fire training in that building or confined space. We have it all up there, and we love practice with them because we always learn something when we host them as well.
Yeah, and it's the old adage, don't give your business card to your neighbor when your house is burning down. You want to establish those relationships. And we saw some fires on the Air Force Academy not too long ago.
Sure did.
Very recently, where those partnerships with Colorado Springs proved pivotal. And no doubt people see the C-130s taken off from Peterson Space Force Base from these runways, and they probably wonder, why do they have those orange numbers painted on them? What is that mission? But I know here in Colorado and regionally, it's an incredibly important mission as we're starting to approach fire season again. Can you talk about what they might be seeing? What are those airplanes? What are they doing? Who do they belong to?
Sure.
They're definitely not Space Force.
They're not Space Force, nope, but they're in the Department of the Air Force, and so that will be the 302nd Airlift Wing, and they fly those C-130s, and one of their missions, especially that time of the year, is fire suppression and going and battling those wildfires. The big orange numbers is so they can spot and identify the airplanes from the ground and saying, okay, that's number 6, that's number 1, that's number 4, and so they can call those in. And so we have great relationships with the great folks out at the 302nd Airlift Wing, as well as another wing that's on Schriever Space Force Base, the 310th Space Wing, and they provide lots of space support and operations support to all of the missions that are out at Schriever.
Yeah, the total force, when you think about the Department of the Air Force, the active duty, the Guard and Reserve is really represented well here on Peterson. Especially when we start thinking about that NORTHCOM mission, that no more important than defending the homeland. And as the Secretary talks about, and General Saltzman, as we're thinking about great power competition, we look at China as a pacing challenge, and we look at Russia as an acute threat. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt where the Secretary has focused both military services. It's clear his priorities are China, China, China.
That's how he starts every speech.
Every single one. So, good commanders will listen to their civilian leadership. I wanted to pull the thread on that a little bit. If you can talk about how your mission ties into the overall great power competition. And when we look at our potential adversaries in the future, this place is so important. And I know you're proud of your airmen and guardians. Just give the big picture to our audience on how it ties into the big picture.
Okay, well, thanks for the question, because it's something we talk about often. It's really important to us because obviously we want to keep the bases running on a day-to-day basis. But where we're really going to succeed is if that bad day ever happens, if we ever are challenged by China or another adversary, how are we going to be able to respond? Are we going to be able to provide what we provide on a day-to-day basis? So think about all the operational missions, and whether it be happening at Peterson or Schriever or one of our other installations, they rely on the electricity that we provide. They rely on the HVAC that we provide to cool all their mission systems. They relied on the cyber and comm systems that are going into their facilities, tying into their mission comm. What about these security forces that are making sure that folks who are not supposed to be on base stay off base? And all the contracting that happens for all the new weapon systems and things they need. Virtually everything that we do is in support of those bigger missions and a lot of those space missions that are happening day to day. So what we think about often is, well, what if we are challenged? What if the adversary gets into our systems? Maybe it's a cyber attack, maybe it's a kinetic or a non-kinetic attack on one of our infrastructure systems. Are we going to be able to punch through and still provide that support that we need to, whether it be backup power or maybe a backup comm line, or how are we going to bring that chill unit back up to provide the HVAC capability? So we think about that often, is not just keeping them going on a day-to-day basis, but what if we're challenged? What are our backup systems? How resilient are we? And then, when something bad happens, to one of those systems, and let's talk about infrastructure, how do we react to it? Are we able to react to it quickly? Are we, what about in the weekend or nights when maybe there's not enough folks here? How are we able to keep those systems running? Because as we know, those space operations missions are 24/7, and therefore our missions are 24/7. So it's real important, again, back to the partnerships is, hey, what do you need from us? And then how can we provide that even in a contested environment?
Yeah, I think we, after 9/11, our Department of Defense saw a changing adversary in Iraq and Afghanistan. They saw what we were good at, and they said, we're not going to attack the United States, their coalition partners, head on. We're going to find the gaps and seams like HVAC, like power grids, and no different with China and Russia. which if you think about it, it's why the Space Force ultimately was created. They said, hey, the United States military needs space so much that we can actually look at gaps and seams in something that they're so reliant on and maybe get to the needs that they want via that means. Same thing with the base, all the bases you're in charge of. So I think that's important. But without a doubt, we're in the middle of a standard budget crisis here nationally, and the elected officials are doing what they do. But everybody's got challenges, and everybody's fighting for dollars, not just the Department of the Air Force, but all the departments across our U.S. government. What challenges are you concerned with here at Peterson and across all of Space Base Delta One? Can you talk about some of those, please?
You bet, and thanks for that opportunity. I'll start off with infrastructure resiliency, because what I was talking about before is all of these things that we provide to the space missions, to the Homeland Defense missions, and all the other missions here on our installations. They rely on us to provide those. And so I already mentioned power and HVAC and common. There's a whole host of other things that we provide them. How resilient are those systems? First of all, we can look at it on a day-to-day basis. And I'll give an example out at Schriever. Schriever is a newer base, but it's not a new base. And it was built around the same time, which was about 45 years ago. So a lot of those initial systems, and maybe I'll call them water mains or electrical, they're all getting old and time to be replaced. And so a lot of those things are failing on a more frequent basis. And so where are we going to get the resources to go after those and replace those lines, and so we don't have those issues anymore? And that's just in a benign environment. In a contested environment, if the enemy were to get in our systems or be able to do things within our infrastructure, how are we going to be able to punch back? How are we going to be able to provide that same power and HVAC and comm, et cetera, to the warfighter to ensure their missions continue to go? We call that infrastructure resiliency. It's not just within the base. We get our power from the off-base utilities, and we're partnering with them to ask them, how are you resilient in case the bad day happens in the United States? And so we're having those tough discussions, but discussions that are getting places going. We're learning some things that they're actually doing some resiliency items themselves off base, and then we're partnering together and able to do those together, because we're in this fight together. Another challenge is, especially at Peterson and Schriever, is the Space Force loves to put a lot of their assets here in Colorado Springs. And it's a great area. It's a great area to live, to bring up a family, just to slow down your roots here. It is a wonderful place. And I know we've been stationed here for a while. But when there's so many space missions and you don't have enough facility space, what do? Well, that's our responsibility. So we've been putting a lot of space missions and Homeland Defense missions off-base at off-base lease facility, and those are working out well. But it's a long and expensive process to get them off-base, and in the end, it's really temporary. We don't want them to be off-base for longer than they have to. We have run out of facility space. And so we've done several studies at both Peterson and Schriever, and the numbers are about 1.2 million square foot of facility space deficit between the two installations. More at Peterson, but still a large amount out at Schriever. And so what we're doing is we're looking at every single facility that we have here and saying, do we need to have that certain mission or mission support in that facility, or do we need to clear that out, put them somewhere else, and then redo that facility to put a space mission there. We've recently done that with the former Leadership Development Center, which is the great conference center that we had on Peterson. No longer Leadership Development Center. We've now got one of the Delta 7 squadrons bed down in there. And so check, that's one organization. We've got no less than 9 lines of effort on Peterson alone to bed down those missions. It's going to take time, it's going to take resources, but we do have a plan, and if with some patience and some additional resources, we'll be able to bed down all the units. It's a shame what we're doing right now is not being able to do bed down all those missions. Another challenge to talk about with our people is affordable housing. And especially in this area, there's no lack of housing in the Colorado Springs area. It is getting to be a big city, and there's a lot of development going on. But it's the affordable housing that's really taken a toll on us, and especially our younger airmen and guardians, really our young enlisted folks, because the options for them off base, once we've filled up our our on-base housing at Peterson and Schriever is, I can afford to live only in a certain few areas in town, and maybe the schools aren't great in that certain area. Maybe the neighborhood is not as safe as I'd like it to. And so we're working with the city, and we have a new mayor in the city, and we've worked very closely with him and his staff on, creating some of those affordable housing options for our younger folks that are coming on base. And so we're making some headway there, but it's a long road ahead for that. The next challenge I want to talk about is actually, there's some really good news. It's childcare and childcare availability. And when I first came into command about 20 months ago, our wait list between our 3 CDCs, Child Development Centers, 2 at Peterson and 1 at Schriever, was over 400, probably about the mid 400s, of children that we did not have space for. And so that really forces families into decisions of, well, do I now spend more money than I really have or that I want to on this off-base childcare facility, or does the spouse now stay home and instead of being employed, continuing their career, staying home and caring for the children? And so it's some really tough decisions that those families are making. So some things that we have done, again, in my short time here, is we've increased the staffing. We've had our own job fairs for CDC specifically. We've helped navigate them through usajobs.gov to help them get a job, to apply for the job, and get an offer in the same day at the same job fair. So we're helping navigate. So we're in a much better position staffing-wise for our CDCs. We still have some needs out at Schriever, but we're in a much better place than we were just a few years ago. And by having enough staffing, now we've opened up more rooms in the child development centers. But that's not enough. Now that we've got most of the rooms open, we're mostly fully staffed, we've driven that list down from 450 to about the low 200s. Which is phenomenal. Knocking that list in half is phenomenal, but there are still almost 200 families out there that have a bona fide need for childcare that have to make those tough decisions, either paying, more out of pocket, or just the spouse is staying home. So we actually, we've got some great folks in the Delta, some great creative thinkers, and so we have worked with the Office of Secretary of Defense, and last year we received a grant, nearly $979,000 to grant money to establish contracts with local off-base child care centers. And what we get for them is basically leased child care slots. And so now what we do is we have one right now, and there's about 20 to 30 children that have been enrolled, but we're going to go upwards of 50. And we're also looking at other child development centers around the community. Is we go through our list, and the person who was on the list, the first dibs. Hey, we can't get you on Peterson or Schriever CDCs, but we'd like to offer you a slot in this off base. Would you like to take it? And a lot of times the answer is, oh yes, definitely. It's closer to my home, it's closer to where my spouse works, and then how that works for us is they will pay us the on-base CDC fees, and in return we will pay whatever that child development center off-base through the grant money, we will pay them the off-base price. So it's a win-win. The military families get the child care that they needed at the price they expect, the on-base prices, and the off-base provider, they end up getting more business. Okay, so we're expanding that program to other child development centers in the area. So far, it's been great. We just started it last year. I believe it was last October we started, so we're about 6 months in. We've fielded about 30 families so far, but every single week there are more and more children that are going. And so again, it may only sound like 20 or 30, but that's 10% of our wait list that is now, that's taken care of just in the last 6 months. We really want to expand that program. We've briefed this program to Mrs. Brown, Ms. Shireen Brown, the spouse of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Mrs. Saltzman, the CSO's wife, is going to be coming in here soon, and we're going to show her that pilot program. But anyway, we're really proud of this. We've got a lot of work to do, but this is a really, really good start.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think everybody knows that we attracting and retaining talent is important, not only in the DoD, but Air Force and Space Force. And initiatives like the CDC that you guys have been working through are huge to retain that talent. And I really applaud you for that. SFA, one of our main missions is to advocate for the Space Force. And we will continue to take that message to Capitol Hill and to our elected leaders that are interested in finding ways how to help the Space Force. So we want to help you there. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing some of these challenges. What else? Are there any more challenges that you'd like to chat about right now?
Well, I mean, we could go all day with these challenges, but it's what's called job security.
Yeah.
But one more I'd like to highlight is so Space Base Delta One. It's not just Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
We have 4 installations that we are running outside of Colorado Springs. But in addition, all of the deltas that are on Peterson and Schriever, they all have their geographic separated units.
Right.
Most of them fall not on a Space Force installation, on an Air Force base or another post or out in the community. All of those GSUs also need to be cared for as well. And with the fact is that we do mission support, we also do GSU support. So we're also supporting not just our installations here in Colorado Springs, but supporting all those needs for all of our installations outside the Colorado Springs area, those 4. But also, when needed, we're helping all of those GSUs that are attached to those deltas. And you brought up the typhoons in Guam, at Guam Tracking Station, and they did have one last year, and any support that we could offer them through the 36th Wing there. So again, it's about relationships, because those installations and those assets are on somebody else's turf, on somebody else's base, and when there is a generator problem, or if there is something that is not mission related, that's when we can come in and help and say, hey, we need to program a project here. We need to work with that local CE squadron to maybe get it higher on their priority list, because understanding that mission. So that's a challenge, because we're limited with the amount of folks that we have, and really we weren't plussed up to do all of this GSU support. We do it because it's the right thing to do, and because no one else is going to be able to do that. We have the expertise here. And so it's a challenge, because it's always prioritizing and reprioritizing things that are happening on our installations versus our bandwidth on a project that's off our installation too. So we're always taking a look at those and trying to help where we can, and then not letting our eye off what we have to do here in the home station too.
Yeah, I think that global nature of the Space Force, the way you described it, really will hit home with a lot of people, because oftentimes there's a lot of buzzwords deployed in place. The Air Force would say our runway is our aircraft carrier, and you have to support that.
Yep.
But geography matters and physics matters with the Space Force. So
Sure does.
It is a global mission. We have ground tracking stations around the world. The Satellite Control Network is a perfect example of that when you think about Diego Garcia and, very remote places that need that support. And while resiliency in LEO, MEO, and GEO has been the talk of the day, resiliency of the bases and the off-base infrastructure that feeds into the on-base infrastructure, I think I really appreciate you bringing that up, because that is so important, how the fence does not just stop electricity and water and so on and so forth. So our local elected leaders, the new mayor here in Colorado Springs, it's an important relationship. And with that being said, you'll be old and gray one day, and you're going to look back at your time as the Delta commander. But that makes us look at the future. What do you see the future of Space Base Delta One? What are your predecessor or your successor is going to be thinking about? And hopefully, I know you're thinking about it, but you're setting them up for success. But there's some things you can't think about. But when you look at the future of Space Base Delta One, what do you think about?
Well, it's a great question, because it's something I think about what do I need to leave to my successor? And maybe it's just the 4 short months that I have, and believe me, I'm not counting down. But it's, where do we need to set ourselves up for success in the future? And it really goes back to supporting those missions and having confidence that if that bad day happens, if the enemy gets into our systems, are we able to continue to operate? Infrastructure resiliency, facility space, all of that kind of all churned together, and then taking care of the folks. Are we able to do that in today's fiscally constrained environment? And I think we can. I think it's going to take a lot of advocacy and a lot of senior leader involvement to say, hey, our mission systems are important, but so are our mission support systems. Yeah. And maybe it's classifying some of our mission support systems as weapon systems. Right. We have a building out in Schriever that most of the satellite operations happen. And the power and the HVAC and the comm in that building, why isn't that a weapon system? Why can't we classify that and then resource it as a weapon system? And we have examples across the Delta under installations that just put us on par with the weapon systems, because they all know, all the senior leaders know that, all the weapon systems we have in orbit or on the ground are absolutely important, but none of those missions can happen without what the space-based deltas and the mission support tail and what they provide. And so in the future, it's probably just a plan to resource the infrastructure and the facilities on Space Force bases differently than maybe on other Department of Defense bases. Because, and it's a generalization, but if that bad day happens, a lot of forces on other bases are going to pick up and move. Tanks, airplanes, striker vehicles, lots of things are going to pick up and move. What's not going to move are the space missions. You mentioned deployed in place, we call it employed in place. If we need to, if the United States needs to up our game in space, again, that bad day might happen, or preventing that bad day from happening, then our space systems, with just very few exceptions, they're going to be operating here and mostly on our bases. And so we need to be able to support them as though they're in combat. And so making sure that our power systems are hardened, our communication systems are hardened, that our HVAC systems are able to run even when contested. Having that and that confidence that we are going to be able to fight through and continue to support as we do during peacetime, that's where we need to be. And like I mentioned, the people part of it too, we need to make sure that the people understand, and the folks that take care of those systems understand and are equipped and trained to be able to fight through that bad day.
Yeah, very recently the commander of NORAD USNORTHCOM, General Guillot, was asked in the Senate Armed Services Committee in his annual testimony in an unclassified open press manner, but asked about some drone incursions out at Langley Air Force Base. And just as a general rule, it just speaks to the resiliency of our bases. And in Space Force, if you think about an aircraft carrier with all the electronic warfare and the defensive and offensive systems that it's got on it, if you pick that up and put it at Schriever and you fought a war from Schriever, it needs to be resourced just like that aircraft carrier. And there's no doubt where the money goes in the Navy. The Department of the Navy fights from those carrier strike groups, and it naturally gets when pennies get pinched, they're going to go to those carriers. I see your point, and it's very well taken. That resiliency across the board is going to be huge. So I wanted to give you one last opportunity. We've talked a lot today. We've talked about some challenges. We've talked about the opportunities. We've really bragged about Space-Based Delta One, the people that make up, a lot of the airmen that make up this very important Space Force mission. But I know you recently had an all-call, and you had a chance to talk with them. You said it yourself, there's just a few months remaining in your command. But for parting shots, what would you tell our audience the importance of Space-Based Delta One and anything else you'd like to leave them?
All right. Well, I'm going to say this first before I forget. Thanks to Space Force Association. I'm a proud Space Force Association member, and we really appreciate this and other forums like this. Your first Space Power Conference in December was fantastic. I was there. Looking forward to the second one. And what you do to help our missions and help our people just cannot be explained more. So thank you for everything that you and Space Force Association are doing. Parting shots. Well, I mean, the mission systems, the weapon systems, the infrastructure systems, they're all great. They all do amazing things, but they don't do great things unless there's great people behind them. And whether it's great folks that are designing them, hardening them, keeping them running past their lifespan, it's the people that actually make this place run. And it's our job as senior leaders to make sure that they are taken care of. And this is Leadership 101, as we've done since day one, but just on a grander scale, and understanding hey, there's a mission here, and you are part of that mission. And where we can link our airmen who are processing CAT cards, checking IDs at the front gate, letting contracts, providing chaplaincy support, any one of the things that we're doing, helping them understand how they're part of the bigger mission and how they're important and critical to ensuring those missions are happening. That's job number one. Linking them to the mission, and then taking care of their and their family's needs. If we can do that, and we've been pretty successful, but we got a long way to go, and as you know, that never ends, we're going to be successful in the future. So it's the people that absolutely make the difference. All right, one last parting shot. Our patch here. Okay, we were born in July of 2020. We had 6 installations. We have since added the Maui Space Surveillance Complex. And in 2025, we're actually going to get our 8th installation. It is Prospect Harbor, Maine, which is currently a Navy satellite command and control facility. That mission and those people have already chopped over to the Space Force by way of Delta 8. And therefore, since the mission now belongs to Space Force, the installation will come to the Space Force. So that installation will become our 8th installation in 2025. But we started up with 6, and this is a 6-headed Hydra from mythology, and it was indicative of our 6 installations, all coming back to one organization, one body, being Space Base Delta 1. We are truly, one family, one team, one fight. And so I wanted to show off our patch, but also I wanted to give you our patch so you can have one. We think it's the coolest patch in the Space Force, but we're a little biased, but that one's for you. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate all that you do.
That is strong. On behalf of the entire Space Force Association, we want to thank you personally for your leadership for the past years. The ingenuity and the things when you're thinking about with CDC and housing and all the things that support our Airmen and Guardians, it's just been fantastic. But on behalf of the entire SFA, thank you very much, and congratulations on a great command tour.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Matt.